All right, well, welcome everyone. Welcome to panel on world building, role-playing game applications, cultivate leadership development for a thriving future. My name is Suzanne Ewell. I am the founder and driving force of Creative Crisis Leadership. We are a nonprofit organization that promotes social resilience and disaster preparedness by using experiential learning, games, and fun, and role-playing plays a big part in that. I have with me my co-chair, JJ. Would you give yourself a brief introduction?
Hi, I'm JJ Rosella. I'm founder and chief immersive officer for Access VR. We provide immersive learning training for the government and for corporations and assist them to adopt the new technologies with immersive learning. And I'm excited to be here with you today.
Thank you, JJ. We have an exciting agenda. We have 5 very experienced and talented, knowledgeable panelists. We will introduce them in a moment. I want to go over the agenda first. First, we're going to have Joe Lasley give a little bit of context for what are we even talking about when we say role-playing games and leadership development. Then we're going to do a brief round of introductions from the panelists. Then we will have, each panelist will have 5 minutes to give a presentation. Then we have the exciting moment. Our panel would like to demonstrate for you what role-playing games might look like in this context. So we're going to have a little performance from them or game from them. Then each panelist will have 5 minutes to talk about their work. And then we'll have some questions for them and open it up for audience questions. Is everyone ready? All right, with that, thank you. Joe, do you want to tell us what this panel is even about?
Well, I don't know if I'll do that, but I'll talk for 2 minutes and then we'll see if we'll find out. Hi everyone, my name is Joe Lasley. I'm an assistant professor of leadership and organizational studies at the University of Southern Maine, and I'm founder of Game-Namic Leadership, where I do all kinds of fun leadership development, action learning, and game-based workshops. So I did my dissertation on leadership and development and group dynamics in role-playing games, and my PhD was in leadership studies. And so I really got into this, studying it and using it through my own personal experiences. And then I found out that there were other people who had these interests in this interdisciplinary thing of game studies and role-play studies, and this other interdisciplinary thing of leadership. And eventually I found these really cool folks that are on the panel here today, who have a combination of interests, both in role-playing games and in leadership or leadership development. And it's been really fun to talk about this in the leadership context with a bunch of leadership people and have to explain role-playing games. And it's been really fun to talk about this in the role-playing transformative play initiative type circles and have to explain leadership. And here we are at the nexus of both of these things. And this is the lineup that I have found so far of people who study, experiment, put into practice, facilitate all of somewhere in this nexus between what are these two things combined. And so it's a pioneering space and a fun, exciting space to be in, whichever angle you're coming from. And because it's interdisciplinary, it applies to everything. So very excited to see this evolution of this effort, which thanks to Creative Crisis Leadership's support over the past couple of years, we've been able to get together for virtual roundtables. We had a roundtable at last year's ILA conference, doing some other things, and we're all individually doing a bunch of cool stuff too. So that's how this came to be. How do we get the word out and share our interest and passion for this particular combination?
Thank you, Joe. And I think another question is, how do we help people adopt some of these innovative and creative ideas that make leadership development and learn training fun and therefore better improved? Thank you, Joe. Let's do a round of introductions. Sam, who are you?
Thank you. Morning. or afternoon, wherever you are at. So my name's Samantha Funk. I am a program manager with Goodwill of Northern New England, the Workforce Solutions branch. I'm an academic researcher and an active role player within the RPGs.
Thank you. Heiss?
Yes, hi. Good evening from Europe. My name is Gijs van Bilze. You can pronounce it any way you like. I'm a serious game expert. My company is called Live Action Learning. I'm an active role player, which is why I'm on holiday in Italy right now, as I just did a wonderful live action role play here in Italy. But I also dabble in academia a bit, and I very much put it into practice. So I will be telling you a bit about the wonderful work that we did at the United Nations only 2 weeks ago.
Thank you. Matthias?
Hi, my name is Mátyás Hartyanti. I'm researching leadership development and games at the Corvinus University of Budapest in Hungary. And I'm also a trainer and consultant in leadership development. I will talk about my research.
Excellent. Antonio?
Hi, everyone. My name is Antonio Esquerra. I am a PhD candidate at Florida State University in the higher education program. Usually my research interests have to do with leadership pedagogy and game design, often merging those two.
Thank you. So those with Joe. Joe, I'm going to consider you introduced. Yep. So those are our 5 panelists today. Now, before we start with our little demonstration, JJ has a proposal to all the audience.
Okay, so we want to make this immersive, interactive, and start getting you to play, because one of the elements that's part of RPG or role-playing games is the idea of play. My favorite part in role-playing games is creating the character. And so we're going to ask you guys to listen, if you choose, should you choose to accept the mission, to listen to these presentations from the point of view of a character, and to come up with questions from that character's point of view. We're also going to invite you to hold a shadow class in the chat. I don't know if any of you have taught classes online, but during the pandemic, we realized that students were in Discord holding a whole secondary class. But we're going to invite you to do that in the chat, so that while you are listening to the presentations, you can write in questions. I highly suggest that you actually give your character a name, but let's show them the archetypes, Suzanne. So we've given you a little piece of paper that actually writes out the definitions, like going to ChatGPT and asking them these various archetypes. But they are the warrior, the mage, the scholar, the lover, and the ruler. You're welcome to pick any other archetype, but once again, the scholar, the mage, the lover, the ruler, and there was one other. What was it?
Warrior.
There, the warrior. You're welcome to give yourself a name and to write your question into the chat, and then later we may actually call upon your character to ask the question live. So just giving you a point of view shift, and now I will hand it on as we step into our vignette.
Thank you, JJ. So what we ask you to do is imagine that you're coming from the perspective of this person. How would you see the world differently? Role play is all about shifting perspectives, either for yourself or on other people or on yourself, and how you behave. So with that, I think we will go on to our vignette demonstration of role play games. And who is leading that?
I'll be the game master for this, yeah.
Okay, you're on.
So before we begin, I just want to emphasize that this is not necessarily how all games are going to be. This is an example of what they could look like. It doesn't have to be in a fantasy setting. It could happen in an office setting, in a classroom setting. The world that you create is going to be unique to what you want to accomplish. But for this particular case, I'll be taking the role of the game master or the facilitator of the role-playing game. And our party here is composed of Joe, who will be playing a magic healer, sage kind of character. It's a little bit clumsy, but he has a quest to find the perfect soup recipe. And over here, we also have Rogue Sam. She's going to be an urchin mag who has a gambling addiction and will bet on anything at any chance. Now, suppose that our party just got a little bit of a quest handed to them because a kid got kidnapped by a goblin. So the party's climbing through a cave, following the tracks that led them here from a caravan after witnessing a caravan ambush. And what's going to happen? I'll turn to my characters now.
Hey, Sage, Joe, we have to sneak in there. Yeah? How much you want to bet we're going to make it?
Well, sure. We'll bet. We got to find this kid, right? And these tracks lead into this cave. So I say we go in the cave.
Okay.
I will cast invisibility so that I can be sneaky in this cave.
So as you enter the cave, you notice it's this gloomy place. There's a fire going on. And right next to that fire, there's a kid tied to a post. And then you see a goblin. He's just, adding a bunch of spices and just liquids and bones into this stew. And he's just really, really excited. I'm assuming, are you guys going to try to approach him?
I want to try to sneak up and get a look at what's in this soup.
Okay, so can you give me a stealth check?
I roll my die. I got a 1.
All right, with a 1 is a critical failure. So I wanted to show to the audience, like the outcomes that of our actions are often determined by luck, and that's how you push the narrative. So once a critical failure, you're not going to get anywhere. In fact, you create a whole chaos. So as you approach this stew, you trip into it. And what the goblin realizes, all of a sudden he sees this liquid dripping out of nothing, and slowly your invisibility fades away, giving you your identity away. What do you do?
Greetings, fellow soup enthusiast. I see you have a child that I'm looking for.
Ah, yes. Well, first of all, what are you doing in my cave? And second of all, I indeed have a child. I'll be making the most delicious stew. And finally, the boss will look at me and see the great potential I have to become the camp's chef.
You're going to put the kid in the stew?
Of course. No. You never had a child stew before? It's delicious.
Lean over. Obviously, now that our invisibility has now been given away, I'll lean over and kind of like just taste the soup that's dripping off of Joe, and
Can you give me
a little bit.
Can you give me okay, so are you going to show him that you didn't like it, or are you trying to hide that from him?
I'm going to try to hide that I didn't like it.
Give me a constitution check.
Okay. I rolled 8.
Right, 8 is a partial success. So he likes it. You can tell like you like it, and he kind of has an idea. He's going to tell you something is missing, right? See, I can see that you have the taste. So what do you think we should add to this stew? It's the child, right?
I don't think it's the child. I'll whisper over to Joe. I'll bet you 2 gold pieces you can't hocus pocus your way out of this one, wiggle fingers. And then just kind of look at stuff a little bit in my pouch to see if I have any ingredients.
Good soup making goblin. What did you say your name was?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Bubbling the Goblin.
Boblin? Yes, Boblin the Goblin. I I'm interested in what you've chosen to put these particular seasonings with this particular child, and perhaps I could convince you of a different ingredient that would go better with these particular seasonings.
And what ingredient would that be?
It would be
Cave carrots.
cave carrots. Yes, cave carrots.
Okay, give me a persuasion check.
I got a 13.
Oh, that is a really, really good roll. All right, so on the 13, he is so excited and he's like, yes, you're right. That could be wonderful. And when he jumps out of excitement, accidentally pushes the kid and the kid starts falling off a cliff. So what do you do?
Try to run towards the edge to see if I had anything that could catch him, but I'm a halfling, so I have short legs.
All right, so you
I
run the
can't
cliff.
see the kid anymore, right?
No, you can't see the kid, but you do
Well,
see.
I can't cast the spell on him then.
Okay. Yeah, you don't. Unfortunately, you don't see the child though. But what you do see is a little bird, just a hummingbird, just flying around, and slowly gets right next to your shoulder and just sits on it.
I'm looking over the edge of the cliff. I don't see anything. I think he died. I bet you 5 gold pieces on that one, though.
And as you say that, the hummingbird starts like tapping on your shoulder. Joe?
Yes, hummingbird?
And he keeps pointing at the stew. You have an idea that he's trying to tell you something, and then this might not be a regular hummingbird.
Okay, I see what you're putting down here. Boblin, what? I have a question for you.
Yes.
What if you didn't have to impress this goblin boss? What would you really do if you could do anything you wanted?
If it was up to me, I really want to go to culinary school, but that is really not accepted in the goblin community. We're expected to kill and scare people, but all I really want to do is just, I have this passion for baking.
Well, help me with this one, Sam. What if we gave a favor in trade with this goblin?
Mm-hmm.
If you let us walk out of here with this hummingbird that is definitely not a child, then I will write you a recommendation for a culinary school.
Oh, recommendation from a prestigious mage. Yeah, I suppose that we could work that out. I mean, I cannot use the bird anyway. Yeah, that sounds like a deal. I'll let you walk away.
All right, let's go, Sam.
Scene.
Also, you owe me 2 gold pieces because I wiggled my fingers out of that one.
I'll tap the shoulder of the goblin on my way.
So to conclude that scene, I'm going to show you all that. I want to just emphasize that the way you apply something like this, it's going to look very, very different depending on your goals. So for instance, if it's just for leisure, you might end it at that. But if you want to take like an educational approach to it, for instance, you just had a bunch of challenges thrown at you and you had to react to them, right? Often the way the narrative was being pushed was out of your control, yet it made you think on your toes and react to what was happening. So it can be applied to things, for instance, like leadership learning, which I'll talk more about that in a bit. Often, if you put a little bit of reflection, you can have participants make meaning of what they just did and gather some experiential learning from what was initially just a game.
Thank you, guys. Excellent job. One thing I noticed personally is how interactive it is and how the co-creation between the characters and the game master, and how much the trainer, the developer keeps putting it back on, well, what would you do? Well, what would you do? It's not, I'm not making a decision, which is quite different from a lot of traditional gameplay, role play training is where it kind of runs. So I think that role of facilitation really came out for me. We have a quick question from Kathleen asking, as a mage, have you ever seen Monsters, Inc.? Kais?
Yeah.
You have a great movie experience ahead of you. Put it on your list, must see.
Yes, I have seen it, and but I will watch it again just because of this this panel now.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. I hope you got a taste for how that actually is different from conventional role play and conventional training. And let's give the panelists some time to get a little bit serious and talk about their work. So first up, we have Samantha Funk.
Thank you. I am going to dive right in. So organizations and businesses are increasingly requiring and valuing skills that are markedly different than those that are regarded by the educational system. We as adults are ultimately finding ourselves in situations where we need to find and gain specific skills that need to be learned and developed pretty rapidly, especially for our changing world right now. The educational system, traditional educational practices often hinder creativity by imposing high stakes failure, standardization, and emphasizing singular answers. Whereas role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games, and game-based learning necessitates the development of adaptive leadership competencies. Faced with complex and dynamic problems within organizational contexts, efforts are being made to facilitate the development of creative leadership, benefits that are focusing on interpersonal and intrapersonal relationships. So developing positive relationships that facilitate individual level and team level creativity using this type of narrative facilitation is really crucial in the role of effective leadership. Tabletop role-playing games provide us the opportunity for intentional group processes and dynamics to happen organically. TRPGs, or tabletop role-playing games, have an inherent social engagement functionality. They rely on social interactions between the players and their GM, as witnessed in our vignette, to create the play experience and drive the story's narrative. There is a huge increased popularity of D&D and additional role-playing games right now, and we are seeing more academic and institutional support for research. So the expanded growth, interest, and popularity among collaborative, improvisational, and structured role-playing games creates a prime opportunity for scholars, researchers, organizational leaders to investigate the developmental, therapeutic, and practical uses of tabletop role-playing games for leadership development, with the transferability and the permeance of skills that are learned and developed. Game-based learning in business and education can help our teams improve their performance, their communication. They can help them take responsibility for their learning, gain knowledge, achieve and sustain engagement, promote transformational mindsets, and become open to creative thinking and innovation. There are three primary results that happen from this. So players can experience an increase in their social competence, collaboration, and community engagement. Players develop a vital sense of introspection, resulting in a higher awareness of the self, resulting in a higher awareness of their choices, their actions, and consequences of those actions. Role-playing also provides individuals with a better understanding of human behaviors, presenting opportunities for players to manage their mistakes, setbacks, and develop emotional intelligence. Participating in this collective enthusiasm of role play and in these interaction rituals, players are presented with opportunities to evaluate and understand the consequences of individual and group actions, which enhances our ability to self-reflect. It demands us to examine moral sensibilities and investigate ethical values in challenging decision-making situations. D&D was the first tabletop role-playing game that combined board games with pseudo-theatrical role-play, and researchers have found that the ability for players to enter the headspace of a character, of somebody other than their primary ego, creates a chance for that person to develop and enhance their levels of empathy. This alternative mind space allows players to shift the scope of their perspective, expanding their understanding of why people do things, for what reasons, how social dynamics alter those reasons. The need to feel connected and have a sense of belonging is intrinsically human. Players who participate in the exploration of distinct aspects of their identity through regular gameplay and character development do report higher levels of social competence and success. They express their social needs being met, and they develop a better sense of acceptance. Development and maintenance of in-game and out-of-game relationships are also important, and through continued involvement, it manifests into a maintained acceptance within that social group. So players who have had higher levels of social anxiety or isolation find that D&D groups are more appealing because of a developed sense of connection and belonging with the other members. The ritual and community of RPGs provides instances of social achievements, acceptance, enhanced skills through predetermined achievements and goals. And it's really important that leaders of organizations take note of the ability to create this community to further enhance the development among their teams. The question really that lies at the heart of all of this is what experiences provide the opportunity to shape, test, cultivate leadership skills with transferable ease into our real world. And it's really at the intersection of creativity and leadership where we can find the answer. Evidence in literature right now surrounding leadership development through game-based learning does suggest that using games in learning activities and organizational programs increases the likelihood of the player that is significantly more apt to transfer those skills and those skills that are learned in game into reality. Leaders have to remain flexible, allow individuals permission to break with convention, implement processes that encourage team goal setting, creativity, and completion. Given today's rapidly changing world and rapidly changing pace of global organizations, global businesses, the need for practice of play in flexibility and relationship building and sense making is essential for creating growth and adaptation with leadership. That's it. And I'm happy to take questions at the end.
Thank you. Yes. Please put your any questions you have in the chat now. We are holding questions till after the presentations, but feel free to put anything in the chat. And with that, Thijs.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you very much for that presentation, Samantha. I think it sets the stage really great to what we're all doing. And as I am here mainly as a practitioner, as somebody who designs and facilitates serious games at organizations, I will try to give the practical part to what Samantha has so wonderfully said. Why do we do this? So my name is Gijs van Bilzen. I'm from the Netherlands, and the company that I work with together with my life and business partner is called Live Action Learning. And Live Action Learning is not only the name of our company, but also the name of the method that we're using. And that's a method that's very valuable because of it, the intensity of the form it is. It's a very intense form of experiential learning. We also call it embodied and embedded leadership development. And to put it in more easy words, it's like being in a movie. As opposed to what you've just seen with the tabletop role play, where, for example, you have dice deciding on chance. What we do is we create entire worlds, we create environments where you can actually walk through, see, hear, touch, feel, anything that you are like, that you do. We make anything from a couple of hours to a couple of days. Experiences where people can really be there physically in the movie, in the world that they are making. So your surroundings are actually there, and you are actually there, and also the inner workings of you are actually there. And we already know how to play roles. I mean, during life, we are maybe a parent, maybe a colleague, we are a friend, maybe a manager, and those are roles, all already roles that we play. So we know how to play roles. What I'm talking about is not acting, it's playing a role, which is slightly different. And you can choose whatever parts of you decide that want to show up in a certain role. And so that means that you can also start experimenting with different kinds of roles where other parts of you show up, or maybe you develop new parts that you put in that role and then see how you can transfer that back into your real self, for example, into your working situation. So in the movie, you also feel what your character has, and you have different behaviors from your character. You have different emotions, and you work on that, and you use that in order to get new access to new skills and new behaviors. So let me give you two concrete examples. First of all, our most intense and valuable experience is one where you sign up individually. And then for 2.5 days, you are transported into a different world where you play, in this case, managers of a failing travel company that needs to overcome the very many things that are going wrong there in order to get better to be a successful business again. But primarily the team of character needs to come together and overcome their internal differences. And with this, we create characters based on individual intakes and individual learning goals. And only after we have done an extensive intake, we start designing the characters that people will start to play. And those characters can, for example, be better at certain things that the person is already able to do, or the character can do things that the person is not able to do, or maybe the character is a very positive version of something that you really, really find annoying in a colleague and that you want to gain some empathy from. So there's several ways where you can translate personal learning goals into a character and then use that to transfer skills back into your personality again. Well, this one that you sign up individually, we make for intensity. So it's high, there's negative emotions also, because that's where we learn from. It's a high pressure environment. And that means that we take care of safety. That means that we have at least as many facilitators as participants. Both executive coaches, leadership trainers, game masters, trained actors are all there in order to make sure that it's a safe and guiding environment for the participants. But what if your boss says, oh, this sounds fun, let's all go and do this? Well, we just did this at the United Nations in Geneva, where one director said, oh, I have 30 chiefs of staff here. Can you please give them this experience? And then we said, well, yes, but we'll make it slightly more accessible and safe. In this case, the setting was a school. We actually had abandoned primary school. It was amazing. And we, instead of writing the characters, we wrote the children, and the participants would play parents. So the participants would be able to design their own character and think of, hey, what kind of engagement do I want from this? And in that way, we try to see how can we make it as safe as possible. So to summarize, yes, Suzanne? Live action learning allows you to learn in a really immersive way. It gives you tools to learn skills and behavior that are hard to learn in more traditional settings, and it can be a very intense but safe way to work on your personal or team development. By putting yourself bodily into another environment and also taking on the inner world of another character, you reach a very high level of retention and a high level of learning in a short amount of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gijs, and thanks for those interesting insights on kind of the practicalities and the realities of using this in a corporate and a real life setting. Up next, we have Matthias.
Yeah. Hi again, I'm Matt, and Samantha and Gijs have described quite well why you might be interested in the application of role-playing games and leadership. And it might surprise you, but I'm not going to argue for the uniqueness or the innovativeness of the RPG approach. On the contrary, I claim that the field of leadership development has utilized various role-playing and gameful methods for decades. For example, some mixed leadership development with gamification in the past, and most of the popular elements of this gamification hype, namely points, badges, and leaderboards, are well rooted in cognitive behavior therapy. But let's go back even further. As early as 1943, famous social psychologist Ronald Lippitt observed that the best setting for leadership development are situational exercises that mirror real leadership situations. They provide an authentic and safe space for experimentation and development through experiential learning. And the modern usage of gaming simulations in the leadership development probably started in 1932 with Maria Mironova-Birstein in the Leningrad Institute at Soviet Union. And even before that, the first modern organizational simulation, the Model League of Nations, is more than 100 years old. It started in 1921 at the Oxford University by students. And of course, we can go back even further, to pre-modern examples. But what I want to say here is that role-playing methods in leadership development are at least 80, 100 years old. And while they are not full tabletop role-playing games in today's sense, but we could conclude that every part and aspect of role-playing games has been used for leadership development at least once. What I find special about tabletop role-playing games is that they can incorporate and include all of these mentioned approaches into one integrative framework. So from business simulation, serious games, applied drama methods, game-based learning, and so on. So after digging this deep into this retrospective history of applied role-play, I have realized that the main problem is that these fields are usually cultivated and researched in silos. They rarely know about each other, and even if they don't know exactly what the other method is actually doing. Just one example. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the so-called Knövin framework, or Synovin or Synovin. There are a lot of pronunciations. I typed in the chat, so you might know what I'm talking about. How many of you know that this Knövin method and the know-how around it is full of ritualized role play? Hands up, please, if you were aware of this situation, that the Knövin know-how uses ritualized role play. I see no hands up, so possibly it was a new information you as well. So what I attempt to do with my PhD at the Corvinus University of Budapest, Hungary, is to solve this exciting puzzle. And instead of researching in silos like others usually do, I'm trying to connect all these role-playing approaches to see the big picture. Because I think that all these approaches rely on our evolutionary capability of imaginative play and pretense. We use the same cognitive capabilities when conducting a strategic scenario planning and playing pretend. So I researched the application of role-playing in leadership development interventions from this broader perspective. And talking about RPG studies, the list is becoming longer and longer. I used to indulge myself in the vain fantasy that I had read all the relevant literature. But today, I can no longer keep up with the exponentially increasing number of journal articles in the field of RPG studies. So I think we are on the verge of having this knowledge accumulated from within, spill out, and fertilize these surrounding fields like leadership development. And the mere fact that we are all here today is a proof that it has already started. We are exploring the potential of tabletop role-playing games in the field of leadership. So I think that this unrevealing process is unstoppable now. I think the main question is just which side you want to be on. Early adopters, late majority, skeptics. As one of the most common phrases in tabletop role-playing games states, it is time to roll for initiative. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Here I'm telling you how wonderful that was to listen to and unmuted. Thank you, Machas. Good insights into how it works in bringing it into an academic setting. And to hear more about that, I believe we'll hear from Antonio.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. Great job, everybody else. I'm really, really intrigued hearing everything you guys are talking about. Anyway, so something I forgot to share when I was giving my introduction is that I also work for the undergraduate leadership studies certificate at Florida State University, and I'm one of the instructors there. And for the past, 4 years or so, I've been teaching classes like leadership theory, leadership and change, leadership in communities, and so on. And I've been using role-playing games in the pedagogy that I apply in the classroom, and I've also been studying it. And this kind of led to my dissertation, which is I'm going to just share a little bit about what it is and some preliminary findings. I'm still in the writing portion of it. I need to submit everything by the end of October, so keep in your thoughts. Dissertating is tough. But what I did for my dissertation study is I heavily modified the mechanics and the narrative in a game. This is, how many of you are familiar with Avatar, The Last Airbender? I don't mean the blue people from James Cameron. I mean like the TV show from the Nickelodeon, the 2000s, right? This one. So they released the game and I liked it and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna modify the hell out of it. And that's what I did. I just changed a lot of the mechanics, I changed a lot of the story, I changed a lot of the interactions that are possible in the game. And I added a lot of leadership pedagogy. So for instance, I added lessons within the story that will be delivered through letters that players would receive, or I added mechanics that would reward players for exhibiting leadership learning throughout their gameplay. And I also added as part of the game a little debrief section at the end of every session, where like after players would play 2 hours of whatever of their game, they will have 30 minutes of a guided discussion where would they connect what they had experienced in the game, kind of like we did in that little vignette, to learning objectives that they had prior to their session starting. And what, how many of you are familiar with adaptive leadership theory by Heifetz, Ronald Heifetz? Okay, I see some hands coming up. So this particular game that I modified was for the purposes of teaching adaptive leadership to undergrad students. So my study, what I did is I had 5 participants, all undergraduate, participate in 4 sessions, each one lasting 3 hours, 2.5 hours of gameplay, half an hour of reflection. And I went with 3 hours a week because it's kind of like what usually a class setting equates to on a weekly basis. And the intent was to observe him, go through his experience and answer the following questions. So I'm going to read them because I don't want to butcher them. So the first question I have was, what adaptive leadership concepts the participants obtain by being part of a modified TRPG? How did they exhibit adaptive leadership knowledge? How do participants describe the influence, if any, of their game experiences in their understanding of adaptive leadership concepts? And how do participants apply adaptive leadership knowledge to alternative scenarios after being part of this game? I am still working on writing the results portion, but some preliminary findings that I can share so far is that they indeed are exhibited learning. I'm using Bloom's taxonomy for those of you who are familiar with it. A lot of the things that they displayed was understanding and also being able to apply these concepts within the setting. Some of the students even went as far as being able to analyze these concepts and compare situations between their personal lives and what they were seeing in the game. So overall, I think it's the results that are coming ahead are really exciting. I'm really looking forward to being able to share more. But that gives you a little bit of an idea of how this can be applied beyond, like I said, again, it can be applied in a classroom, like Heinz was saying, it could be applied in an office with a bunch of corporate guys. Like it doesn't, like the applications of it are endless. And that's all I have to share with you all. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. We're looking forward to seeing a brilliant dissertation and seeing your brilliant findings. All right, Joe, you're up. And ladies and gentlemen, Joe, Jen, and whatever else we have here. I haven't found a good word to cover, words to cover that. My apologies. If you have them to suggest, please do so. Joe is covering two topics, so he's going to give one presentation and then sort of jump to another topic.
+1 to anyone trying to do a thesis or dissertation on Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop role-playing games, and to anybody who wants to use it for any reason. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is a pilot program that I ran through Gamnamic Leadership as a leadership coaching group that was designed specifically to be both a role-playing game and leadership coaching exercise simultaneously. And I do have some slides to share, just a few of the brief things, and to also maybe keep me on track here. So the leadership tabletop role-playing game. The purpose of the pilot was to see the functionality of this tool for leadership development, similar to what's been explained before. But if we play as a group of 4 to 6 people, we play a TRPG similar to Dungeons and Dragons, how do we actually do the leadership development piece while we're playing in terms of trying to do it specifically? And then we expect it to kind of expand further to do community building, employee engagement, other development outcomes. To do this, I asked some people, some of which are here today. So thank you. If you're here, thank you very much for being part of this pilot program, to do 4 2-hour Zoom sessions where we would play the RPG, have some discussions and reflections, and then I would play this dual role of game master and leadership coach. More on that in a little bit. We had some intersession journaling and reflection to go along with as part of this experience. And I asked for constructive feedback on the process because this was a pilot. So what did we what did I hope that people would get out of it was to have some fun, to actually get some leadership development based on what their own individual goals and learning edges are, to create some sense of community and support in the process, and to develop this exciting new adventure. And I think we made progress on all of those fronts. The structure was that we had 4 sessions that were 2 hours each. It was about weekly or every other week. We tried to schedule it for when everyone is available. And what I learned from all this is we actually need much more time with that. It takes time to build the development outcomes. So doing it in one session this way anyway, wouldn't have really got us there. And this also allowed us to use an action learning cycle with reflection and journaling in between the events. And as that cycle continues, the learning can get deeper and deeper. The first session we did some formation and some creative warm-up and character creation. The next few sessions we would do a check-in, kind of reconnect and ask for support and offer support for our own development intentions. And then we would play and debrief, and trying to be mostly on the play side with those middle sessions. I will also add that in terms of character creation, how we built the leadership intentions into the game was to have the characters built based on archetypes. And so we used an archetypes indicator instrument, and then came up with leadership development intentions based on those archetypes, and built the characters for the game around that same instrument. And so we really merged what I could have done as just a regular leadership development activity to take the instrument and reflect on your experiences and have people share with you about their experiences of you and in that archetype. We were able to do through actual embodied role play and reflection. I did offer some email support that was actually kind of necessary, thinking back, by providing some insight and affirmation to the players individually between sessions. And we closed with epilogue to the story. Part of the goal was to actually use the story and plot development and the NPCs, which I did develop some non-player characters specifically based on the characters and intentions that the players brought. So they had someone to interact with that called their role to action, so to speak. And I did a follow-up session to kind of talk about how it all went and things for that. And I would actually recommend much more time, more sessions, and maybe even more than 2 hours each session to do this. Some takeaways: it really is an opportunity to do participatory leadership, but a lot of scaffolding and structure is needed to support that. The ambiguity and free-form nature of improv is wonderful, and to mix it with leadership development really needs to have some direction from the GM coach, and to offer that support. Being both a game master and a coach is a big dual role. Each of those roles could have taken my entire energy and attention, and it was a lot to do. And even with some administrative support, I think it takes a team of people, and this would confirm also, I think, the way Heis is doing it with high immersion and also high staff support and safety. D&D is very popular, so you can get people who aren't really into it, especially with younger populations, but not only with younger populations. But mechanically, it's not the ideal system to do the story-driven, improv-based development, and to balance the attention among the players in terms of taking turns and providing enough support, affirmation, and those types of things for the vulnerability that's required for the real leadership development that's happening. And in terms of framing it as cutting-edge leadership development, not just as, hey, here's a role-playing game leadership development. This is kind of a summary of it. The leaders reflect on playing together and how they felt in the game. And when they say something, they can learn about how they showed up in the game and how they show up at work. So the next presentation I'm going to talk about is something I do as a scholar. It's a research project that I did, and Antonio actually helped me with this, so shout out to Antonio. We proposed the double pyramid model of facilitation in RPGs. And here's what we did. Because there is a need to actually understand the inherent benefits of TRPG experiences, but then what happens when we actually merge them with other facilitated types of activities, and just assume that the inherent RPG stuff will come back and join that. So we wanted some quantitative data analysis. There's a lot of qualitative stuff, and there's more that's needed, but we wanted to do that. So I did a survey. We got over 400 people, D&D players specifically, and we measured psychological safety, group cohesion, creativity, and I created a scale for dungeon master facilitation. We did a bunch of analyses to test all of these instruments and the data. And here's what it came up with. As you could imagine, everything is interrelated, but not everything is related the same. Facilitation and creativity were actually not directly related, but everything was interrelated with cohesion, clarity, and support. So the psychological safety and group dynamics of the group are actually the core of the RPG experience that is impacted by facilitation, but the facilitation is not directly responsible for the outcome of creativity. And so if things like creativity come out of these group experiences, facilitation matters, but we shouldn't just assume that if I facilitate a certain way, that I will get a certain outcome. And so the facilitation scale, in case you're interested, what is Dungeon Master facilitation? The unbolded items were removed from the scale by the factor analysis, and we came up with these 5 items that were our statistically strong, reliable measures of facilitating a role-playing game. So if you want to facilitate a role-playing game, these are the things that you should brush up on. And I will end it there.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. And some great practical tips and direction. I love where it's going to actually give some actionable pieces for people. All right. Thank you to our panel. We'd like to open it up to questions now. We've gotten some great questions in the chat, some of which we kind of had thought about, but JJ, are you ready to to open up for questions? Now, anyone, you can ask a question. JJ's going to direct questions and comments. Feel free to drop a question or comment in the chat. You can also raise your hand, and we will, and you can unmute and ask your questions.
Excellent, and we're gonna kick you off on the questions. Just while everybody gets warmed up into the things that they want to drill down deeper on, remember at the beginning we even invited you to think as an archetype, right? And although we had defined those archetypes on a piece of paper, the great thing about archetypes is they live in our heads in some universal story language. So the first question we came up with was, what is unique about using RPGs versus conventional role play in classroom for leadership development? And then we thought, so that's the intellectual portion of the question. We thought, well, what if the lover would say that? And although we came up with this flowery in the dance of guiding young leaders, how does the heartfelt narrative of RPGs different from the simple waltz of ordinary role play? In Commedia dell'arte, the young lovers are idiots, right? So I even wonder if that's too complex of a question. So I'm going to open this up to the panel. We want you to think of the first question, but even the question from the young lover, I think, would be, how do I love? You know, can I love in these worlds, and how does that happen? So that's the question to the panel. Anyone can answer either how do I love, or what's the difference between using RPGs and conventional role play in classrooms. Take your pick.
I'd really like to take this because it's amazing to think about it like this. And also the answer is feelings and emotions. So often when we do role play in organizational settings, we still only use this bit, but it's so important to have the feelings and the emotions and to experience them, and to really make sense of that, because that's what you're also doing in the real life. You have feelings and emotions, so you need to take those into account. And if we're talking about the lovers, then you need that empathy, that love here, and that will actually show you the way and open up new ways of learning. I can talk about this for a long time, but I see others.
Okay, so I already mentioned that role-playing games can combine the benefits of different approaches like simulation-based learning, dramatic, and gamified learning. But just as Gijs mentioned, so there is the emotional, affective side, and there is one more feature that I think is very interesting. It's maybe the most distinctive feature of tabletop role-playing games is that weirdly hooking dice with a lot of sides, you know. So RPGs use these devices to generate random numbers, as you have seen when Joe and Sam were rolling dice. So randomness can represent uncertainty, which is a key factor in our recent world. You know, our future is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So it's VUCA. And so RPGs, by their nature, can incorporate these stochastic components. And some of the dramatic techniques are very good, but they cannot incorporate these random numbers. While computer simulations can, of course, incorporate numbers, but they usually don't really strong on the role-playing aspects. So tabletop role-playing games can fuse these two sides, the emotional side with the probability-based side. And this can help leaders to think in a probabilistic way and gain a systematic thinking and stuff like that. Thank you.
Excellent. Antonio?
Actually, I'll share in a second. I was looking for it, but I wrote an article on this exact topic, and I'll be happy to put in the link in the chat in a second. But as Matthias was just touching on, is that randomness aspect. When you are in a classroom setting and you have students role play, there's often that social incentive that they have to reach a conclusion no matter what, which we know that in reality, that is often not necessarily going to be the case, and that we can also learn from failure. And the thing about having an RPG that pushes, it's having randomness being pushed, that pushing the narrative in a specific direction that sometimes this is completely out of the player's control, will often make them critically think and adapt to the situation as it's evolving, but also can lead them in situations where they don't reach the outcome that they wanted. And that is okay, because we can learn from that too. The traditional role play in the classroom sometimes, will not necessarily get at that stage. Players will feel awkward that they're putting each other in a wrong situation and then just magically resolve things. But that's also presenting an unrealistic resolution to what many times can happen.
Thank you so much, Joe.
I'm speaking to the lovers directly here that synchronicity is a cosmic force beyond our ability to understand. And when you improvise in a storytelling exercise, that you are acting or your role in, you are bringing about the synchronicity of the universe, that we are meant to be doing what we are doing, and we are meant to stay together.
Excellent. I'm going to take us to the next question.
JJ, before you do that, can I check? That question struck me as very close to what Kimberly Yost asked in the chat. Students in my business department participate in numerous online simulations as individuals and teams in various classes. What are the specific differences between a simulation and an RPG experience? What differences are there for instructor facilitation? And I just wanted to check with Kimberly that she got some answer for her question.
Hello. Yeah, pretty much. So I typically don't do the role playing in the classroom. We typically have the students, usually from, Harvard Business Publishing, get that online simulation. My experience is, and I don't always have control over which simulations get chosen for which classes. But I know for my teamwork and leadership class, I choose patient 0, which I feel is very good because it is about sort of those, we're going to create this country and we could die and it's zombies. And do we attack our people with bombs or do we not? And so I think there is a lot of emotional and ethical situations that arise for the students. When I have used a Mount Everest, my students were very upset because their goal was always to get to the top. And the game doesn't always allow you to get to the top. Right? That sometimes there is failure and people die and it's a good experience for them. Other simulations seem very data driven in, you need to get this metric and the other metric and this metric, and then you're supposed to win. And I'm not sure that I always have that mindset for what I want for my students. But I also have a concern about them taking on personas that are different than their own, so that maybe they will be making decisions or creating situations that they may not be able to see themselves doing in real life, in being overtly, authoritarian or whatever that might be. So I guess that's part of my question is when, especially if it were a fantasy RPG, how has that affected students, college students, specifically in terms of how they're learning their leadership and teamwork development?
So there was a great question that just came up from Lindsay. Lindsay, would you like to ask that question directly?
Sure. We've talked a lot about in role play that there's the shift, Sam was saying, from like high stakes failure to the ability to play with the ideas of failure, and the conversation about Everest and you can't get to the top and people die and it's a good experience for them, which I think is a funny way to frame it. But it makes sense that struggling with failure in a different way breeds an outcome in terms of people integrating it into their leadership style. And I was wondering if there could be a discussion from the panelists about what they see as the impact beyond, would you frame it as increased resilience? Would you frame it as more flexibility in a VUCA setting? Like, how do you frame it as the integrated impact of having experienced failure and gotten through it, or however you would speak to that?
Do we have anybody who wants to take that on?
I can get us started, and I'll request that our LARPers talk about safety.
Yes.
Something happens in the group dynamic where things can get processed differently in a role-playing game group dynamic than in a work setting or any other setting. And so themes like loss and failure and things that are emotionally hard are still emotionally hard and very impactful when they come up in the game. But they are able to come up in a different way because of the particular group setting that it happens in. And that varies. That's not a guarantee. It's not like if you play D&D, it makes it safe. That's why I need the LARPers to talk about safety. But there is humans have always used story to make meaning of the things that we don't understand or can't cope with. And so to be a part of the story in the role play, there's a sense of alibi of like, oh, this isn't really me, but I am really feeling it. And that negotiation of bleeding emotions between the character and the player is a hot topic for debate, and we could do a whole panel just on that. But essentially, it affords us with opportunities, and also then with things we need to pay attention to if we're going to go there, so to speak, in terms of facilitation, and why it's so widely used in therapy settings, actually, too.
Maciej, do you want, or shall I? Okay. Well, I think Joe said it really well. It's about the alibi, and I think that goes to both questions that have been asked. You can really experiment with different things, and those will still feel real. But there's a problem with that, in the sense that what if it becomes too much, and what if I feel it too much, or I can't differentiate anymore? Is this character being mean to me, or is the person being mean to me? And so that's why what Joe says in LARP, in live action role play, we work a lot on safety. And for example, the most important part of that is you can always step out. We have different mechanics, either, for example, a look down. If you think like, oh, I don't know, you do this, and you are ignored by all other players, and you can just walk off and be yourself for a while. Or we have like a check-in mechanism, just to say, for example, I might be experiencing loss in a game and might be emotional about that, and then some other person will come by and just check in, like, is it your character that is being emotional right now, or is it you as a person? And if it's me as a person, then we have ways to quickly comfort you, give you a good place to talk about that and debrief, or find a safety person in that. And the bleeding part that also Joe talked about, which is your personal experiences or feelings bleeding into your character, or vice versa, those of your character bleeding into you, are actually very valuable and important learning points. But the more you play with that, the safer you need to make it, in order for people to be able to say, oh, I want to engage with this, I want to experiment with this, because I do feel safe, and I do feel that the environment will take care of me, even if I'm not able to at that moment.
Yeah, I would also like to add something that I actually adopted from LARPs into the modified game that I did is having that debrief at the end of the experience. And it's a time where, and I know it's done in live, but it's a time where we slowly and through a guided discussion step outside of that character that we're in and back into the real world. We are able to comment on what we just experienced and then make meaning of it. But having that transition and done in a way that acknowledges what happened while also trying to harvest something out of it is really, really powerful, but also I think important, especially if you're trying to do it for something beyond just leisure or gaming or fun. Like if you're trying to make meaning out of it, I think that's the critical step too.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch upon what I just attached into the chat as well. So just like Antonio and the other panelists have mentioned already, is there is a common and highly encouraged system among game masters, players, LARPers, is that consent. Consent is huge in the gaming world. And it shouldn't just be within the gaming world, it should be, all over. But safety tools exist for the exact reason, for like people who are PTSD survivors, people who are trauma survivors. These rules are there to help so that you can process events that happen in game outside of your individualized personality. So discussing consent ahead of time doesn't mean that you can't have surprises in the game or in the experience. It does, however, mean that the group has more knowledge of the player's comfort and discomfort and can frame narrative plot twists around that and in a more mindful and meaningful way. Even a game that goes well as, with a highly skilled and proficient DM, they will provide that aftercare that Antonio was talking about, the check-in with their players to create that space between the game and the real world that, invites people to process and experience in a safe and safe environment. There's also a safety toolkit that is readily available for players and GMs to utilize and to review prior to the start and during games. So there are a lot of tools out there, and the DM acts as a moderator and make sure that those tools are in place and ensures that safety and consent is a huge part of the experience.
Thank you, Sam. And I think we have to wrap up here. And I'd like to go out on that note that safety, this is obviously a hugely powerful tool, but as with anything else, with power comes great danger and great risk. So that is a topic we definitely want to talk about and learn about more. So thank you to all the panelists for a great conversation, and thank you all the audience for your participation. We had some questions we didn't get to. I would like to remind you that all of the conference sessions are being recorded except for roundtables and posters. So you can come back and watch them for 90 days after the conference and explore. I invite you to explore everything else the conference is offering, one-on-one networking and small group discussions. Joe, you might want to set up a small group discussion opportunity for anyone who's interested in this topic. You have opportunities to meet the sponsors and, of course, talking to other attendees. So if you do want to continue, there is the Community Networking Center virtual, where Joe, I hope maybe the panel will go in the event portal and join a group discussion. And please feel free to reach out to anyone presenting or anyone who's here. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. And with that, we will leave you with one final question for the audience. Please think about how can you bring the creativity, the experimentation, the fun that we've talked about here, role-playing games, to your leadership development practices and efforts today. So thank you to our audience.
Thank you all.
And panelists.